Hello, good morning, and welcome to the BTS Creative Academy podcast. We're currently streaming this episode live across YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. We're joined today with the writer, director, co-founders of the show SOSBRN. Is that how we say the show's name?
Yes, perfect.
SOSBRN. Tell me about the show then. What's this show about, Ophelia?
So the show is about Brian, a young man who's recently almost lost his best friend due to an accidental drug overdose. I say almost lost because he's in a coma. And currently Brian is dealing with sort of the grief of that, and he essentially is having hallucinations of his best friend, a sort of ghost following him around all day. So we explore sort of Brian's inner landscape of what that looks like.
Wow. And what's your role within this show? You're directing this show, is that right?
Yes, I'm the director.
You're the director. And Dexter, writer, an assistant director. Tell me your take on the show. Having wrote the show, would you position it in any different way to how Ophelia's just told us?
Well, my Wi-Fi is a smidge lagging at the moment, so I got the gist of what she said, and it was absolutely perfect. Yeah.
So this show, tell me a little bit about the journey of getting to Edinburgh then. So when does it start at Edinburgh?
So we've done this show before in March of last year as a sort of university project, quite small scale, and that's when I got first involved in it as well. And then sort of as soon as we wrapped up, we knew that it was going to continue and potentially go to the Fringe. So yeah, over the summer holidays, we did some research, we did some digging, and we basically got started straight away. So we never really put it down, even though we had two separate runs. We never really put it down. And obviously we got really lucky to receive funding and all of that and get a lot of great people involved and make it accessible to our great cast and our great crew. Yeah.
So has the whole team stuck together from the beginning of last March, as in March of 2023?
Yes.
Wow. So this is so nearly like an 18-month journey then.
Pretty much, yeah. There's been a few changes in cast and crew, but apart from that, yeah.
And the show itself, has there been an evolution with the show, or has it pretty much stayed the same?
The show used to be a lot longer. For our first performance, it was about an hour and a half, and now for Fringe timings, it needs to be about 50 minutes. So we've managed to cut a decent amount, but I think it hasn't lost any of the charm that originally attracted audiences to it. So yeah, I think it's pretty much at its center the same show. It's just sort of fit for the Fringe now. It's a lot more sleek and it gets to the point, but it still manages to have fun along the way, even though it's a rather macabre sort of theme. That's really been one of our central tenets, has been to try and make it accessible and to try and make it funny. Just because you can't let an audience just see something sad or just see something funny. You know, it's not how we think that people can be moved. You sort of need to make them laugh, make them care about the characters, and then maybe you can make it a bit more hitting.
From your point of view, Dexter, as the writer of this, if you had this successful run 18 months ago where it was the full show, and now you've had to cut bits out, cut bits back, how did that feel? How did you feel about doing that? How did it happen? Like, did you just go right? No, don't need that, or was it a painful process?
It was a slightly painful process because there are some jokes that were in the original that I spent weeks working on making sort of nonsensical enough, but still sort of fun, and I had to get rid of some of them. But I think as much as it hurt to take away some of the bits, it's still the same show, and it's still something that I think we're all very proud of. So it could have been worse. If it had to be cut to a half-hour play, then I think we would have lost a lot of important stuff. But as much as it did hurt to hack away at this play that has been going on for so long for me, I think it's made it better.
Do you feel the same as director Ophelia about this has perhaps more defined the show, narrowing the time slot down to 50 minutes?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it was really helpful to do the first run with the whole show, and then getting the audience feedback and sort of what particularly moved them, what they liked. And now we've just got a sort of shorter version of all the best bits, I guess. Obviously, it was definitely a compromise with keeping some of the jokes, but then also making the storyline make sense still. But yeah, I think we've really got a very beautiful 50-minute show that still captures exactly what it did first time round. So yeah, but it was, it was not an easy process, but it was great that we could work on it collaboratively. Obviously, it's Dexter's script, so he's got the final say, but getting the cast involved and seeing sort of what they think the best bits are and everything, I think that made it not as painful as it could have been.
And so how did the dynamic work between the two of you, being the writer Dexter, but I noticed you're also the assistant director of the show as well. So you're keeping a little bit of a grip on your work. You're making sure that it's, like Ophelia just said, that you've got the final say in something because you created this, you gave birth to this piece. But Ophelia's molding it into something that perhaps
sorry,
you didn't.
My connection is really not great. You sound like you're being gargled through a computer or something.
How does it sound for you, Ophelia? I'm
hearing like every third word.
Okay.
It's fine for me.
Okay, so that's okay, Dexter. No problem. Catch up when you can, Dexter. But I was asking, yeah. So the dynamics between the two of you. How is that for you, Ophelia? Having the writer there with you on this process.
Yeah, it's I'm not 100% sure how to describe it because obviously it's such a personal story to Dexter, and I felt so privileged that he let me into that and gave me that sort of creative control. But yeah, I think we just instantly connected and sort of were looking eye to eye, and the rehearsal process and everything is very collaborative. So yeah, we just, even if we don't see eye to eye, we're very cool with, chatting it out and seeing what works, what doesn't work. And I think, I'm not sure if you'd agree with this, Dexter, but because it's such a personal story to him, I feel like maybe sometimes I can provide a bit of a outside eye, maybe. And
you get to look at this objectively. You get to sit back, whereas Dexter's in it. I found a similar thing. I direct an act, and I find that I can't direct myself because I don't know what that looks like. And I guess that's the same with writing. And if you're writing a story that's quite personal, then you don't know what that is to the outside world.
Yeah, well, the first play that I ever wrote was years ago back in South Africa, and it was a really educational experience because I sort of started the process where I wanted to be completely in charge of casting, and I wanted everybody to do exactly what I had pictured in my head when I was writing it. But then I got a co-director, and he just sort of snapped me out of it and said, I understand that this is your baby, but I'm good at this, and you need to have other opinions. And it just made it 100 times better. And so it's been a learning process to sort of, because you spend so much time writing and sort of getting into the play and sort of emotionally investing in it, and then you need to give it to other people, and it's no longer yours. It's very much sort of an ours kind of thing. And that's a scary process, but it always makes the show better to have as many eyes and as many ideas as possible.
I think that's one of the beautiful things about theatre, is that if there is a piece of work, it can go out there into the world and people can transform it and make it a different thing. So as you're a fairly new writer, as your work does go out there into the world, how do you feel about work that in the future, if say this play takes off, about not having any involvement at all?
Well, I think I would be okay with it, because it would give me a chance to work on something new, and I think I'd say over the past like 2 years, I've had my fill of it. I think this is going to be a great way to sort of finish at least my direct involvement with the show. If it keeps going, then I am proud to watch my baby keep walking. But you know, it feels like it's no longer mine. It's something out there in the ether that I'm glad to have contributed to, but it's not mine anymore.
Ophelia, tell me a little bit about how you've molded this show and how you've taken Dexter's vision and you've transformed it into to have that objective look.
Yeah, I think Dexter's experience and what we're portraying in the show can be very relatable and is very of our time. The way Dexter in his writing deals with tragedy through humor, it's very much a coping mechanism that reflects our generation. So at its core, it's still very much that, and that's what I wanted to take and let that flourish. And I think that was really important to me when we were casting as well, to find people who have that dynamic, that natural sort of just banter and friendship, and let that flourish, because I think that's very much at the heart of it, the way we deal with tragedy and with loss and with grief. I think, and that's the core message of it. And so that was what I wanted to let flourish, and then giving it to the cast and molding it in the rehearsal room with the others as well. That's definitely what happened, and I'm really happy with how it's developed, for sure, in both runs.
And so the cast with this show, how many people are in the show?
7.
You've got a cast of 7. That's quite a large cast to take to the Edinburgh Fringe. There's a lot of 1-man, 2-man shows there, but 7. Wow, that is quite a large show.
Yeah, and for accommodation, it was a rather bold choice.
I guess, yeah. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the Edinburgh Fringe for a little bit, coming away from the show. So, yeah, the logistics of I'm going up there myself for a week, and the logistics of that can be a bit different and have been a bit of a challenge, not just financially, but trying to find somewhere to stay as well, and then there's all the transport. So managing a cast of 7, plus I guess there was some crew involved. What does the whole team look like? How many in total of you are there?
I think in total
12.
we're 12. So but logistically, obviously, it was a bit of a it was a challenge, for sure. I mean, both Dexter and I have been somewhat through it before, and but yeah, especially with accommodation, I think that's something that we're really proud of with this project, that we were able to compensate a lot of the costs and make it as affordable as possible for the cast and the crew, and that we were able to find accommodation that was not a shared, and that we could facilitate something like the Edinburgh Fringe, which is so great for young and emerging artists, is so invaluable. And as it's becoming less and less accessible, unfortunately, that we were able to facilitate that for people and give them that opportunity, and ourselves as well. But yeah, it is definitely a challenge, and you need to be very early with everything, and obviously it's expensive, but yeah.
So when you said at the beginning of this conversation that you kind of started working on this, looking at this properly last summer. So was that a case of you were organising all the accommodation and the logistics back then?
So in terms of accommodation, it was a funny story actually, because I'm a very early bird. So I was emailing the accommodation that I was staying at last year because I knew they were good and they had sort of reasonable prices, and they weren't actually taking bookings yet, and essentially, and they were not great with replying. So essentially, I ended up emailing them so many times that in the end they gave us a 10% discount, because they were like, "Listen, we've been so bad with replying. We'll give you a 10% discount." But
And
yeah,
stop emailing me. Here's money off.
yes.
Nice.
But yeah, I'd say we were quite early.
Persistence.
Yeah. But I guess with something like this and the logistics of a big team, you need to be. So is that where you said also that you received help with funding for this performance? So are you helping the actors on this journey and the rest of the crew with this as well through the funding you've received? Because it's not just a case of the funding is just for putting on the show, it's making the show possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, shout out to the Exeter Alumni Fund. They definitely helped us a lot with this. And yeah, apart from, because obviously props and set wise were very minimal. So I think our main concern was subsidizing costs for the cast and crew to get there. Because I think that's the main expense. And in terms of the show, we don't need much. We also just physically can't have much because of the sort of space restrictions. But yeah, so that was our main concern.
So tell me a little bit about the funding then. How did you get successful with your funding? Because I know that's a struggle for a lot of people wanting to do something like this. I've tried funding myself over the years and not been successful often. So how did you guys get successful?
I think we were quite lucky to have sort of emerged from a sort of structure of the university, which allowed us to sort of access the alumni fund and have some sort of stable support that we knew we could access, which a lot of other artists don't have, and which we won't have now if we try coming back next year. But yeah, we had some more opportunities than I think other artists do, and we're definitely grateful for that. But we have been reaching out to other more independent places and just trying every facet. And it is what Ophelia said. It's about starting early and trying every single thing that you can, because it'll all help.
For sure. We ended up enrolling in a business module, which definitely helped. We were a bit out of our depth. I think Dexter and I, we sort of sat there and everyone had sort of medicine startups, and we was talking about profit and everything. And they were like, what do you think? When do you think you're going to start paying yourself in your startup? And we were like, yeah, when? But yeah, so we were a bit, out of our depth, but I think it helped massively. Yeah, and I think it's just about really, because those little pockets of money, they are out there, but you really need to be persistent, and you really just need to, get out there and find them. Unfortunately, obviously they're not hugely advertised because money's needed everywhere.
So the funding for this show, because you received this through your links through the university. So now that you're going, you've now, I assume you've left university, and this is no longer a university project. Then this is your own personal project. So they kind of gave you a launch pad to get yourself going.
Yeah, for sure. We did some crowdfunding as well, obviously, but they were a huge help.
And so, what is the process with this, as looking at this as a business? Because I hear many people talk about going to the Edinburgh Fringe and they're lucky to break even financially. You're in a lucky position if you cover the costs. So can we look at something like theatre as a business, if that's the case, that we're just covering costs?
I mean,
It's
at the
kind of like a
beginning,
non-profit.
yeah. No, I agree. I guess at the beginning it has to be that way, that you just sort of barely cover the costs. I think that's just the nature of the business, unfortunately. And then eventually, I mean, we've got our groundwork now. We've got the company, and we've got each other. So we're hoping that, you know, if we find success, that we can build on that, and then maybe eventually we can look at a more traditional business structure. But at the end of the day, we're not business people, we're theatre makers. So I think that's always going to be at the forefront. And unfortunately, there's not too much money in that at the moment. But yeah.
I guess the thing is, when we're doing our art, when we're creating our craft, we can't forget that money is essential to fueling it, to helping it keep going. So we do need to look at this as a business, don't we? We do need to think, how do I keep moving forward to the next thing? I look at myself with what I'm doing with this podcast. I see this as my art form, which may sound weird, but I do. I enjoy this creatively. But financially, I've put a lot into this the past year and not received much back at all. And it's kind of, there is a risk involved when you're doing something creative, and I guess you have to have a little bit of belief and faith in yourself and your projects, of what you're doing, that it will grow into something that you then start to receive later on.
Yeah, for sure. It's about persistence and believing in yourself, for sure.
And how do you feel about that entering in at this point? Are you quite optimistic that you can grow this theatre company?
Yeah, I'm optimistic for sure. We're all sort of doing our own thing after this, doing masters and various other things, but we're so sort of in tune as a team that we're happy to pick it back up at any point. It's super scary going out into the theatre world. And I'm sure that even though I'm, you know, sat here smiling, feeling really optimistic, I might not feel like that all the time. But yeah.
Tell me about that fear then. Tell me about what is scary about the entering into this world.
I think being independent and sort of being your own hype man all the time, and selling yourself and selling your art and everything, and oftentimes being self-employed is definitely scary. I mean, I like relying on myself, but yeah, it's so different from a 9 to 5 job where you get your structure. I really enjoyed university as well because I had my structure set in place, and I had a community around me. But as an artist, you have to build that yourself, and I think, yeah, that's always going to be scary. But I think at the end of the day, going into it, none of us really know exactly how everything works. So I think I find comfort in that. And yeah, I think you just have to take the leap, really.
Is it you're finding comfort in the unknown, in the discovery?
More in the fact that it's an unknown for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah.
The community is equal.
Yeah, and I guess you're putting yourself in a place at the Edinburgh Fringe where there's another 3,000 plus shows there, and the majority of them are going to be going through the same thing that you are. They're going to have the same fears, and they're going to be questioning themselves at the same points. But if you're all doing that, then maybe you can kind of find some support network there. And what about for you, Dexter? What about, do you have any fears about, as you're just about to start and go into the Edinburgh Fringe? Is there a fear for you at all?
Yeah, well, I guess there is that fear of sort of bearing yourself completely honestly on a stage, especially with this show, since it's so personal to me. I guess there is always the worry about what an audience will think and whether they'll connect to it. But it's also, the communal feeling of the shows that have humongous budgets and sets, and the shows that are tiny and sort of being hidden at the back of a pub somewhere. We all get the same opportunities at the Fringe. You know, everyone is equally vulnerable on stage. And so it is that kind of communality between all of the shows that makes me feel like that fear isn't as big as it'll feel. It
is a very vulnerable industry to be in, isn't it? It is whatever place you are, whether you're the writer or the director or you're the actor, you have to bare your soul and put yourself out there, and you don't necessarily know what's going to come back. But I wonder what the consequences are if you don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
it's
I
just
guess
sort of a lack of honesty.
Yeah, and if you never try, you never know. But actually, I started saying something, and then Dexter said something so profound that I was like, okay.
Yeah, tell me a bit more about the honesty, Dexter. So if you know, like I was saying, if you're not vulnerable, if you don't share yourself in this way, because it's scary to be vulnerable, right? It's a really scary thing to share your work and have it open to other people's thoughts and feelings and potential rejection or embracement. There's just so much that could be there. But I said to you,
you can't
tell me
just
about
do
it.
stuff that you know will work. Yeah, I mean, there are always things that you can do. Like, you can do a play that's already very well known and people will like it and people will come and watch it, or you can sort of make decisions that will make it sort of more palatable. But I think we have just tried to stay honest to the fact that it's an uncomfortable story, it's an uncomfortable business, it's an uncomfortable thing to sort of put yourself out there so honestly. But I think that's much more moving and affecting. And that's really what we're trying to do. Like, as much as we are trying to entertain and sell tickets and things like that, we're trying to sort of move people and start conversations and affect the world in a bigger way than just a week-long play. And it's hard to do at such a small scale. But, you know, I think the more you bare your soul like that, the more chance you'll have of somebody actually seeing it and connecting with it in a way that you can't really sometimes connect with, like a large scale Broadway West End musical, which is sort of mostly there for entertainment. We're sort of on the other end of that spectrum, where we're really just trying to sort of create these small scale connections between actor and writer and director, and most importantly, play and audience. And yeah, it's sort of terrifying to do it on that level, but I think it's that honesty that I was sort of mentioning that is just my favorite part of this whole business.
And what about you, Ophelia, as the director with your cast? How do you get them to be authentic and honest and truthful with this piece?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I'm a very actor-centric director. So working with the cast on their characterization has been really important to me. And I think we really, with each character and every actor, managed to do a deep dive into the character whether it's the main character or a side character. And I think they've all been great at really fleshing the character out and giving them a real personality, making them real people. And I think that was the most important bit for me, was the character work, because they are, real people. They're not caricatures of, something or someone. So I think the one-on-ones were obviously really important, but then also the group dynamic, doing group improvisations and hot seating, and sort of seeing how in character and seeing how the characters feel about each other, sort of exploring their dynamics before the timeline of the play, after the timeline of the play. We did some diary entry exercises as well. And I think that then helps to form an authentic, real character that the actor can also relate to. Because I was always open to letting the actors bring some of themselves into the character as well.
How does that inform the piece? How does that help the audience understand the characters and the situation by the actor having a deeper knowledge that resonates further than the moment?
I mean, I think first and foremost, you can tell through the confidence in which an actor delivers a role. You can tell that they've done a lot of research into the character, but also it's little nuances in body language and in the way they deliver lines that, I mean, I'd like to say are slightly different with a certain backstory that the actor knows. Because most of what we did in character work, most of that information on potential backstories and stuff like that, the audience will never know. But the confidence that comes with the actor knowing, and the actor having gone through that, that shows and that translates. And that's, I think, what makes a great portrayal of the character.
You also touched on something a moment ago that resonates with me deeply, is the actor bringing themselves to the role, the actor finding a piece of them within it. That's something that for a long time I didn't fully understand. As an actor, I used to think, I like to be a part and separate myself as much as possible and be that character. Whereas I've found a space where I feel personally better as an actor now when I'm a character, but I find me there also. And I can find more empathy for that character when that happens. What do you think that brings to the actors when they find themselves within it?
It just creates a connection that facilitates a so much easier rehearsal process, but also a better portrayal of the character. I think even if the intention is to go into it and be like, this is so far away of who I actually am as a person, and I could never identify myself with this character, I think inevitably you will find some sort of connection to the character. And I think it's necessary, that connection, to portray the character well. Because, as you said, it gives you a whole new layer of empathy for the character, that I think is really needed to perform that character well. And I think it also is beneficial for the actor and their sort of acting journey to learn how to connect to a character that might be wildly different to who they are as a person, or super similar, but just to find that connection.
Dexter, we talked a little bit about earlier on about making the audience think. What is it you hope that they will think for having watched this show?
Right. Well, just quickly to add to what Ophelia was saying,
Of course.
I also have found it interesting that in both iterations of the play, the central two characters, that friendship upon which the whole play is based, the actors have already been like really close friends before and after the show, and that just really helped the dynamics. They weren't afraid to sort of banter or to watch each other sort of mess up, and they were very close, and I think that really helped. But in terms of sort of making the audience think, it's sort of very important to me to sort of remind an audience that not everything that outwardly seems like it's okay is okay. You know, not all of their happy friends are actually happy when they leave the room. And it's good to sort of make sure about these things, and to recognize when you're dealing with something poorly, or if you are using comedy as a coping mechanism, or if you can make that recognizable for someone. Basically, the whole point of the play when it started was to be a sort of a letter. For me, it was a letter to one person in particular, but now it's a letter to anyone who will see it, which is a sort of large overarching theme of you're not alone, no matter how far away you are from someone, whether it's distance that separates you, whether it's consciousness, whether it's time, it's someone is there for you, and they're looking for you, and they're trying their best to find you, but you need to make yourself accessible. You know, you need to make yourself open to being helped. And I just hope it sort of starts conversations like that. There isn't anything specific really that I wanted people to think. I just wanted people to sort of think for themselves about it. You know, we're just giving them a glimpse into a life that somebody is most likely living at this moment. There are probably thousands of people going through exactly what all of these characters are going through just in this country alone. And it just makes it very relatable. It makes it very connectable. You will come watch the show and you'll recognize someone in it, and all of the characters have their faults and they have their worries, and it's just about sort of figuring out where those fit in this crazy sort of busy life that a lot of people our age lead, where you often don't have time to think about these things or talk about these things with people. So go to the theater, find yourself in a piece of art, and then spend the whole walk home talking about it. That's sort of my favorite bit.
Do you feel that's right, Ophelia, what Dexter's saying there? Do you feel that's the kind of message that will leave people with?
Yes, for sure. I think that was so beautiful what you just said. But yeah, absolutely. I think humor is a coping mechanism. And seeing some of the happiest, jokiest, smiliest people that present themselves like that are actually some of the saddest people on the inside. And I think that's super important because, as Dexter said, it's important to recognize that as a coping mechanism and make sure to check up on people, even if they seem super happy and super smiley, you know, and not to assume, oh, they're joking about it, they're laughing, so they must be doing quite well. But yeah, I don't know what else to add. That was really beautiful, Dexter.
Isn't it is the saying the clown is often the saddest man in the room? Something like that, isn't it? It's you know that comedy, that making people laugh can just be a coping mechanism to help someone get through something really difficult.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it can be very useful, but it can also be a sort of, it can just be a way to push things away and not deal with them. And so, you know, there's pros and cons, but they just need to be recognizable.
And so why write this letter in the form of a play, Dexter? Why not just, if this was a letter to someone originally, why not just write them a letter? Why transform it into a story?
Well, because I'd sort of tried that before. You know, it was for a friend who was back in South Africa, 9,000 miles away, and I would call him, you know, and I would message him, and I'd send him things that I thought he would find funny. but it's hard to open up to someone, especially if it's just over the phone or something like that. And I knew he wasn't doing well. So I thought if I could sort of tell a story that he could find himself in and find me in and find all of our friends in, then he could sort of see it more from an objective point of view, and he wouldn't have to sort of bring his own problems into it. He could just sort of allow the play to be a sort of story and a lesson and a sign of love. And yeah, it's a tremendous shame that he never got to see the show. But yeah, I'm really glad that hopefully it'll reach as many people who need to hear that as possible. And
so let's talk about some hopes for the future then. Your hopes and dreams as you're going into the Edinburgh Fringe. When does the show actually start at the Fringe?
19th.
It starts on the 19th.
So the 19th.
So you're kind of you're at the kind of like that's the tail end of the show, of the festival, shall we say? So you've got a couple of weeks build up to that. Is there any more rehearsals yet to come?
So we're all sort of in different places in the world right now. We had a bit of a boot camp a few weeks ago. And now I think we'll just want to allow each other a breather and then come to the Fringe full force. We feel super happy with where the show is at, so we're really happy with that.
And so when you're there, when you're at the Fringe, what are your hopes for being there? How do you see the vision and the journey whilst you're there?
I guess, as Dexter said, just for people to come and see it and connect with it. You know, I think for us, even though we obviously want to sell tickets and all of that stuff, it's more about having people come who then actually resonate with it. And we'd love for people to, similarly to the last run, come up to us and, you know, talk to us about it and say that it moved them. I think that's definitely a big goal, for people to actually resonate with it, and not just sort of to get audiences in and out and get the ticket sales. Obviously, as we talked about with money earlier, you can't deny that that's still a huge part of it. But yeah, it's always great to hear stories of people who relate to it. We found last time around.
And for you, Dexter, any different hopes and dreams for the festival?
Yeah, no, I just hope people come and enjoy it. It would be really nice for it to get the recognition I think it deserves. But you know, it's so up in the air and it's so unpredictable. I feel like adding specific hopes to this means that you're sort of providing yourself a chance for them to be dashed. So I'm really just hoping we go and have a fun time.
I do agree, but we also talked about the fears there, didn't we? We spoke earlier about how there's fears, so it's important to also balance that out with some positivity, with the dreams, that we could get too caught. It's easy to get too caught up on those fears because they can seem overwhelming, but yet there is a lot of, like I said, there's a lot of positivity there awaiting you. And this could be a wonderful thing for all of you as a team, all the cast, all the crew, but for the audiences as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're all trying to keep up a positive attitude. I think for me personally, I'm a huge RuPaul fan, and he said once that, you know, the anxieties, the inner saboteur, and the fears, it's always there, but you never let it drive the car. And Dexter knows this because I quote Drag Race all the time and no one gets it, but I'm really passionate about it. But yeah, we're trying to not let the anxieties and the fears drive the car.
So the quote, tell me more about the quote. Driveways?
So the anxieties and the fears are all there and they're all valid, but you never let them drive the car.
Right.
So they can be sat with you in the car and you can acknowledge
RuPaul's
them.
Drag Race.
Drag Race.
Yes.
Oh, drag racing. I do know drag.
Yeah.
I don't watch it. I was trying to think drag racing. I was thinking of cars for a moment, and I was thinking like like the American drag racing thing, but not the drag. Of course, I know drag race. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, so that's what where that quote's from. RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
Ah, wonderful. But what a good quote though. What a good quote.
Yeah. I think
Have you
so
got any
too.
other? Have you got any others?
Oof. I mean, so many, and Dexter
I'm
has
putting you
heard
on the
half
spot.
of them. Yeah.
So, where will we find you at the Edinburgh Fringe? Where are you? Where is the show?
So at the space at Surgeons Hall in Haldane Theatre at 4:20 from the 19th to the 25th.
And will you be out there on the streets pulling people in? Are you going to be flyering and getting involved with the crowds?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as a nice little way to wrap this up, what will you be saying to people on the streets? What will you be saying to them as to why that they should come and see your show? You grab them for 10 seconds. What is it? What is your pull line?
We're still working on the specifics of that, I'd say. But I think what worked last time I was there was sort of talking about new writing, up and coming plays, and just throw buzzwords, throw theme words, and hopefully some of them will stick. Then again, I also had a bit of a thing where I would just say, free piece of paper, best quality in Edinburgh, and that seemed to work.
Yeah, it's so difficult to come up with a tagline, but we will get there and it will be great.
I guess there's an element of a work in progress. You go out there on the streets and you test a few little different things out and you see what kind of people are pulled to. And I have a feeling that kind of starts to work when it comes back to that thing of authenticity and being truthful. And I believe that that's something that will help pull your audiences into the show.
Sure.
Well, guys, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to finding you at the Edinburgh Fringe, and I hope to get an opportunity myself to come and see the show. And perhaps we can catch up again there and find out how you're getting on when I see you there. Wonderful.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah.
Well, if anyone has been watching or listening, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you for listening into this conversation. So thanks again, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.